All right, good morning, guys, and welcome to another episode of Father's Fire. My name's Jody Sedrick, and every week we get together to explore the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows, and yes, the fun of being a dad. I just got back from a week of being with my kids in SoCal. My son has a 34-foot Hunter sailboat that they live on, and we went surfing and sailing and watched dolphins, and it was epic. So yes, being a dad is absolutely fun, especially when your kids like each other. So man, I'm super excited to have you guys join me today. As you guys know, I'm part of the Speak Fire family, and we're sponsored by Speak Fire and Rethinking Rich. And today, man, I'm super excited because my guest is a gentleman that I met on TikTok, and I'm actually having a lot of fun on TikTok. I was kind of leery about getting onto it, but Gary Vee and other people were like, man, you got to get on there and get involved, create a voice. And in the process, I've met some phenomenal people. Last week, as you guys know, I had Joe Tang. He's a TikTok guy that I met, and that guy is spreading love and positivity. This week, though, I got Liquid Shano, otherwise known Shane Leketa. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I got my cup of coffee for you. Cheers.
I love it. I love it.
Man, I love your morning vibe. So those of you that are listening, you need to go out to TikTok, look up Liquid Shano. Every morning he's got his cup of Joe, and he's got a positive message of love and inspiration for people. And it just has a great vibe. It's amazing what good morning and 15 seconds can do for the soul.
I completely agree. You know what? It's funny because I have to do it at my own house. With like my wife and I, we get up every morning, and I've got to have the coffee. So if you saw me before I have the coffee, you think, well, who's that guy? Because he's like Mr. Grumpadump. He gets over there with his coffee. He's like, I got to get up, whatever. But really what it does is every single morning I have my me time, right? It's like maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes of me to be able to get up in the morning, set my day off right, whether it's setting my goals for the day, whether it's sitting to take a look at what are things I want to accomplish and achieve or whatever it is. And so I started to think to myself, what better way to be able to bring people in with that, with a positive spin or a positive push for the day? If you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, how quick can just a really quick smile and a good morning help you and get you going the right direction, right? So to your point, it's been so helpful for me, but also for anybody that was hop in there. They're like, well, this is amazing. And now I got people going, where's my good morning? What's happening right now?
It's just super fun to watch how things kind of evolve. You know, it's like I was talking to Joe Tang, and he's like, yeah, I had never intended to do virtual hugs. But as he was talking to people, he's like, hey, this is your virtual hug. And it's led into a whole segment that naturally evolved out of his personality and his honest, true
right.
heart of wanting to lift people and inspire them and make them feel loved.
I think you can tell. You know, what's interesting is it's almost like a psychological experiment sometimes when I'm on there. I'm watching folks that do very similar things, right? Like some of the really big positive influencers and things like that. And I feel like if there's a connection there where you feel that the person is being sincere and they're listening and they're really engaging, even if it's just you talking into a microphone for 15 seconds, there's an ability to tell just by mannerisms and the way you look at somebody that they're being sincere and they care, right? And when they can look at that person and they can say, oh, you know what? I really feel a connection with that person, even if they're not even talking to me personally, but they feel like they are. Yeah. I feel like Joe has an amazing ability of being able to, especially when he makes the phone calls on his lives, when he sits down, he has a great ability to listen. And he lets somebody go through even some of the toughest times that they may go through at that moment in time. And he has just that comforting, hey, you know what? I get it. And it doesn't go too long. And it literally is just a moment for them to get that, I needed a hug right now. So thanks so much. So when they can feel that sincerity, I think that they really latch on to that. And it's something that people need these days. You know, they need that ability to know that somebody's in their corner sometimes when they don't have that in their lives. You know what I mean? So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, I've thought a lot about this over actually years. I've been really thinking about how, when we grew up, because you and I are in the similar era,
Yep.
most of our backyards didn't have fences.
No.
And I remember playing with my friends across 3 yards football, and nobody had
Hmm.
a problem with that.
Nope.
And somewhere in the mid to late 70s, people started fencing in their homes, and
Hmm.
we started to isolate ourselves. And what I've in my opinion, what social media has become, it's tearing the fences down, because we need that connection. We need to be a community. We need to surround ourselves with love and positivity, and people that, hey, you know what, I've really been struggling, and can I just share something with you? And so
Right.
I think social media in a lot of ways is tearing down those fences so that we
Right.
can connect on a level that we all truly need to connect on.
I agree. I agree. We need it. People need people, and even when we try to stay away from that, even if you're an introvert, even if you're somebody that doesn't really necessarily be around it, I think more people found out through this whole pandemic thing where they're stuck at home and they're at home and they're like away from all the noise, and they're like, at first they're like, oh, I'm an introvert, I'm okay, I'm good to go with this. 3 or 4 weeks into it, they're going, wait a second, I just miss going to the grocery store and saying hello to somebody, or connecting with somebody, going to, I don't know, McDonald's or whatever else. And they're just like, what's what? And you all of a sudden realize you need that interaction, that connection, to be able to relate to other people. We need it so much that I feel like this is, even though, mind you, the whole grand scheme of the pandemic and everything else has been kind of a tough situation. At the end of the day, I feel like we're going to be better and stronger from it, because we're going to look at each other to go, I appreciate you as a person and I miss you. And now
Yeah.
let's connect and become more human beings like we're supposed to be, rather than so divisive and divided and split so much. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah,
it's
no, I
important.
love it. The other thing that it's interesting because, well, actually, it's a question that I have for you. I want to know how
Yeah.
many coffee mugs you have, because I'm flipping through there and it's like very rarely do I see a different coffee mug or the
Yeah,
same
man.
coffee
So
mug.
I'll share a story with you. So my wife, it's a point of contention for my wife and I, because she literally says our cabinets are filling left and right, and every time you get a new mug, I got to find a place for these things. But here's what happens. So when I first started back in the day with Coffee Talk, it was a blog. Okay, so I basically started putting entries into a computer, and it was all about my weight loss. So I was 100 pounds heavier, and I was trying to be able to work towards losing weight, get healthy, because I wanted to be a better dad and I wanted to live longer for my kid and all this stuff. So I had all these ideas. So I started losing weight and I started to blog it. And it was what happened was, is in this community, people started to read it, right? And it was called Coffee Talk because, like, just like on TikTok, when I wake up in the morning, I've got about a 20-minute time frame where I'm getting my head right. Well, those are when I'm most creative and my most thoughts are right there to be able to think what I need to do and where I'm at. So I would journal entry those. So when it started off that way, I had people that were like really subscribing into the blog to go, hey, I love this. And then I had one person that I had sent a voice message over to, and he was a radio guy, and he said to me, buddy, listen, you've got a voice that needs to be broadcast. He goes, I need you with the content you're putting out on your blog and with your voice. Let's get this out there. You need to start podcasting. And I'm going, pod what? Like, what are you talking about? So
Yeah.
I started the podcast, Coffee Talk, and then I had a really loyal following. So what happened all of a sudden, all these folks that were the following, they were starting to coordinate with each other to say, well, he does Coffee Talk, but we need to give him a mug from where I'm from or what tells my story. And so next thing you know, I was getting mugs once a week just loading into my cabinet. I'm like, oh, and my wife goes, listen, if I get another coffee mug, I swear to you, like I have a whole storage cabinet, I swear to you, and they're all just coffee mugs right now. I'm like, I don't know what to do.
It's going to be the Coffee Talk Museum of mugs. That's amazing. And so let's talk about, in fact, I want to jump back to your TikTok show, but let's talk
Yeah.
about being a dad,
Yep.
because um like you heard, I try to spend as much time with my kids as possible. We my wife and I really have invested in our kids, and that's been, a legacy of my father, because my father was a Navy guy. I served 20 years under him, and then they wouldn't let me fly because of my eyes, and I'm like, all right, I'll
Mm,
do something else. But But we always, even though we were really tight on a budget, my dad's like, we're going camping, we're going boating, we're spending time together. And so it's been a real legacy.
Yeah.
Um, and so let's talk about your experience being a dad. You have a 15-year-old boy. That's
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
be an adventure.
Well, I'll tell you. So it is an adventure every day. There's ups, there's downs, there's overs, there's unders, there's fights, there's love, there's all. It's everywhere, right? I mean, it's what life and love is all about. But what's interesting is that I have a little bit of a different story with my end, right? So my example was my dad, but he was a no nonsense kind of guy, right? So he was a military man himself. He did 28 years in the Navy. He was a musician,
Mm,
and he basically played from all the different installations, during Vietnam and all these other things that he was working on. I just lost him last year, but
oh, sorry.
what was unique about him is that he wasn't a "I love you" kind of guy, and he wasn't a "I want to give you all kinds of hugs and shower you with all kinds of love," but he was a "I'm going to show you my love with the way that we run our family and the way that we are and the way that we to be an example, to be able to be a providing father and a providing individual, but also good with his advice sometimes, and really was able to do it. So I feel like I've become the dad that I have a little bit of what he's done, but I've also become the dad opposite of what he's done, right? Because I want to make sure that I continue to shower my son with love and affection, and not afraid to hug each other, and not afraid to give each other, open affection types of things, which my father did not do for me, right? So I take a little bit of what my dad did, and I take a little bit of other father figures like my grandfather, who was the loving and compassionate and affectionate one. I mix all of those together, and I try to, because there's no playbook. Like we don't know how to be dads, right? There's no playbook. So I just try to be able to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I sprinkle it all in, and I say, you know what? Let's go ahead and try to be the best version of me and be the best dad that I can be for him at any given time, that he knows he can come to me. And I'll tell you, so real quick story. I'm always about stories, but a real quick story. We bought a hot tub. Okay. I bought a hot tub thinking to myself, it was for my wife. She runs half marathons. She's out and stuff like that, really to kind of, aching bones and everything else that she does. But what the salesman told me was, if you're a dad, you're going to realize that a hot tub is one of the best investments, because what happens is you're going to have no tablets, no phones, no nothing, and it's going to be communication, and you're going to be able to talk while you're in this hot tub. And I said, oh, this guy's trying to sell me a line of goods. What's he trying to do? Whatever. I was going to buy the hot tub anyway, pal. But we bought it, we put it in the backyard, and it is literally one of the best investments we ever made, because almost every night we're out there and we just chill out, whether it's just me and him, it's the family, the three of us, or whatever it is, and it's our time. Even if it's only 30 minutes of a crazy hectic day, it's literally our time to check in with each other, to be able to say, how's it going? What are you going through? Any things you want to talk about, or even for me to talk about stuff. It's amazing. I recommend a hot tub to anybody. What's good family therapy, man?
That's great. And I think you hit on something that's really important. One, we need to find a way that connects for our family. Like our family connect time is the boat. I
Yeah,
mean, we have a 21-foot Calabria, and my kids love to wake surf, and the the videos are on, but the iPhones are on, but it's because they're recording each other and they're
right.
laughing at each
The
other, and they're like,
experience and
oh
stuff.
gosh, did you just see that crash? Let's play that again, right? And so you get this whole dynamic, and I think it's really important that we as dads find what's unique for our family and fits
Right,
our personalities, and don't look at what everybody else. I mean, I'd love to have a hot tub, but
right.
I just haven't made the time to do that or invest in that. So
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about, like we opened with, even outside of being a dad, but human beings need human beings, and we need connection. And what a lot of times is, although I'm playing in the social media space, I'm everywhere, like all over Instagram and all these other places. But I also understand that you got to step away from that sometimes to really get true connection with family and people that are around you, and do the listening part, right? Because it's so easy to fall into that whole trap of being on your phone and just sitting there talking, and then you're kind of like a flyby conversation, right? Your wife's talking to you, you're like, okay, yep, babe, love you. Okay, yep, got it, whatever. And you didn't hear a word she just said, but then you're like, wait a second, I probably should have listened at that moment in time. So then I got to turn it off, flip it over, and say, tell me again, because I need to converse with you, and let's talk. And then she feels validated to say, okay, but I have to find myself doing that sometimes. And I know it's not easy for a 15-year-old to do that as well. But we
Yeah.
go, okay, phone down, let's have a conversation. Let's just talk it out. Let's do what we have to do. So I think it's important to connect that way.
So, and you're at that fun time too, 15, where he's starting to drive.
Right. We just signed him up for driving school, and it was literally one of the, I pressed the button to sign up for it, and I didn't want to press the button. I was like, no. I don't really, I don't really know if I want to press the button. I don't really know if I want to let go of that young man, that young boy that was in our household, but I know that it has to happen. And I know that you have to go through those things as a parent. It's one of those, each stage is him becoming an adult. And I know that, I just don't want to admit that. But it's coming, it's there. I pressed the button, I actually signed them up and went, okay, a band-aid's pulled off, let's go and get started.
Band-aids pulled off. It's like, wait until you get behind the wheel with him.
Oh,
So
I'm not looking forward to that at all.
yeah, it's been fun for us because I have 6 kids and I've taught every single one of them how to drive. And I actually started when they were really young.
Yeah.
When they were 2 or 3, I put them on my lap and let them steer down the road.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
they just love that, right? Um and it's interesting to watch each one because my one daughter, oh gosh, I mean, I've never been as afraid for other people as when she started driving, because she cannot park and she cannot back up. She
Yeah.
can go straight, but she can't park or back up. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just gritting my teeth every time she leaves.
Oh, grinding them right down, man. You're hitting the fake brake pedal on the passenger seat. You're like, no.
Stop. She's like,
That's
quit
awesome.
yelling at me. I'm like, you're about to hit the car. So yeah, it's fun. So
That's
so
awesome.
you're so looking back,
Mhm.
at being a dad, what has surprised you most?
I think, to be honest with you, I think my biggest surprise for myself has been my patience. I literally thought that, I had a vision of the way it was all going to go, right? Like the way it needs to be. It's got to fall in alignment with this. And I have a wife. So if you look at it, I was military man myself. My father was military. Everybody we were this way, and my wife, she's basically should have been born in the 1960s, being a hippie child, walking around going, "Woo, this is great!" Right? So we have two different versions of ourselves, right? And what I feel is my patience with the fact that she can talk to me about things to say, "Hold on, let's talk about this," because the other perspective may be such and such. And the way my father did it was, listen, the way my rules are the rules, and that's the way it is. Let's go down the road, right? Right, exactly. So for me, it's really tough for me to be able to go, okay, I need to listen to the other side of this. So I've learned in as I've progressed at all the years of 15 years of being a parent, and then together, we've been together for over 22 years. When I look at the end of the day, I know that I've grown to become more and more patient with my son and my wife, to become a better family man, a husband, and a dad, where I feel that's one of the things I'm most proud of is because like if you don't communicate and you don't give and take a little bit, that's why you look at the overall divorce rate in the country is so high, because we're not willing to bend and flex. We're so stubborn and so stuck in our ways. You got to be able to bend and flex. And that's one thing I've learned about myself that I did not think I had, but I've really become more and more of a patient individual to say, okay, I need to hear the other side. Let's talk about that. Let's discuss it. I think that's a really important thing.
I love that perspective because when I look back, especially when we adopted our 2 kids, so we had 4 kids and then we adopted 2, and and we adopted them at older ages, 8 and 9, and so we had to go through all those stages of childhood with them. Even though they were older, you still have to go through the psychological
Mm,
stages of connecting with that child. And what it really exposed to me was my lack of patience, right?
mm,
And a lot of times I was like, oh man, why can't it just be this way?
right.
I was fighting against what needed to be done, that I needed to step back and go, you know what, we have a brand new reality. Kids have brought into our come into our home with their own unique baggage and experiences, and we need to help them not only go through the pain and the trauma of those experiences, but also create a foundation for them to build on what they're hoping will be a great experience and a great dad. And so fatherhood has really exposed not only my greatest strengths, but also my greatest weakness.
Yeah.
And sometimes facing that is really, really hard.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is.
It's like, wow, did I just do that? And you know, the one thing that I had a really good model in my dad is I remember a couple times, you know, as a kid, you know, we were being dumb and he exploded and it got out of hand, and you know, and he just went for a walk. And I
Right.
mean, he would go for a walk. I mean, not like, I mean, it was like he was going on a journey, you know, like 2 hours later, he'd come back and you could
Yeah.
tell, you know, even as a young kid, I could see that he was wrestling with what he had just exhibited as a father that he didn't want to exhibit and he didn't want to
Right.
expose. And he was really wrestling with that. He came back and said, you know what? I'm sorry. He
Mm,
goes, yes, you kids were acting inappropriate, but I, you know, as a dad, I need to be better than I was. And so please forgive me.
mm,
And I love that my dad did that. He's like, and I've always tried to go to my kids like, if I mess up and I've overreacted, just go to them and say, hey, I wasn't the best dad in that moment.
mm.
And so I want to apologize. I want you to know that I love you and I will be better so that we can be better. And I think that's hard for a lot of men to do.
Yeah, I talk about vulnerability all the time with men being a sign of weakness in today's society, right? We look at it as being the fact that if I'm vulnerable, if I bear myself back and I apologize, is that a sign of weakness? Is that a sign of just not being a man or being manly or macho or whatever else? And I feel as if that's one thing that I've also learned about myself too, as we're talking this through, is I'm okay to admit my faults. I need to admit my faults sometimes because I'll never grow if I don't admit my faults and I stay just the course of whatever direction I'm going in. I never try to challenge my thought process. I never grow. And one of the things that I always talk about, I partake in these things in November. I do the November where we shave off our beards and then we grow just a mustache. And the reason that we do it is not just for the funny, crazy look that we have just a mustache going, but it's about men's health and it's about men's mental health. And it's about men do not. How often do you hear when you know that there's something wrong with a guy and the guy needs to go to see the doctor and you ask him, have you gone to see the doctor? And what do they always say? Nah, blah, blah, I'm not going to the doctor, blah, 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 I'm
Yeah.
not doing it. Right. And then I always tie it back to the fact of what's important in your life. Are you important in your life? Because that's important. But the people around you that are relying on you, that depend on you, that's probably more important than anything else that matters to you. You should go and don't worry about the fact that you're vulnerable about those things. I know I'm off on a tangent with men's health, but it ties together, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's perfect. No.
Dads are, we too often sit in the space of trying to be macho and we could just rub some dirt on it and it's fine, we're good to go, when we should be digging into the mental side of things to be able to say, is everything okay? Are you checking in? Do you have goals? Are you really working through that? Are you mentally and physically healthy? And can we really admit to our faults as we move forward to be a better version of yourself for your kids, for your wife? That's one of the other things. I have buddies back from Massachusetts. The guys that where I grew up with, they're all sarcastic. They're all like, whatever, blah, 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 which I love. I am too when we get a few beers and we're sitting around and we're talking and stuff. But I sit back with them and I say, for you to be, they always try to blame their wives for a lot of things, right? Oh, my wife is blah, blah, blah. And they hate it when I'm around because I'm always like, oh, yeah, but what about you, pal? And they're
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? What about me? I'm like, have you looked in the mirror? Like, in all honesty, how about all the things you're doing?
Yeah.
Like, think about that. And they're like, oh, dude, this is supposed to be guy time. What are we doing? I said, listen, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're here to better ourselves. Let's better ourselves. And when we leave here, you go back, think about some of the things you're doing with your wife because it's only going to help you in the long run. Trust me.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're not vulnerable. We literally, oh, it's their fault. It's all their fault. Listen, no, it's not, pal. 9 times out of 10, we're the dummies.
Yes. And I think that's really hard for a lot of men, right? And what's
It
ironic
is.
is when we're courting, when we're chasing that lovely
Right.
girl and we're wanting to win her heart, we're kind, we're gentle, we say beautiful things. We might even write poetry, you know,
That's
or
right.
write a rap song. And then 3 years into it, they're like, can you get me a beer? You know, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
but
And then
there's
they're going, wait a
no,
minute, what happened to that guy? What happened to that guy?
yeah,
Where'd he
and
go?
they're wondering what happened to their relationship, and it's because they stopped investing
Yep.
in their wife and in themselves and in each other, and really trying to build that relationship. And I've learned that, I mean, you just have to continually be pursuing your wife,
Yep.
and when you're continually pursuing your wife, you're willing to serve and put her first, and you're willing to go, yeah, maybe I was my tone, because I think a lot of times, especially if you're sarcastic and a lot of
Right.
times sarcasm can be biting, and it's like an
It can be deadly, my
underhanded
friend.
verbal terroristic attack on your wife
Yep.
under the name of sarcasm instead of just being kind.
Yep. I tell my wife, my wife always tells me, she always tells me she goes, I relate to you so much better when you just listen, right? She goes, when you don't try to fix everything and you're like, oh, I'm going to go in and fix it. I'm not, whatever. Let's just go do what we got to do. We're going to turn the page, whatever. Let's move forward. And she's like, just stop for a second. I'm more so just talking to you about this. Maybe it's a parenting thing, with our son, or maybe it's a financial thing that we're trying to work through. She's always like, can you just listen for just a second? And I'll go, oh, you know what? Turn off the Shane vibes, turn off the radio voice, and sit down and open up the ears and just listen. And then when we're done with the conversation, I can go, I understand you now, right? I understand where you're coming from, because when you get heated and you start talking and this, that, and the other, just turn it off. Listen, be vulnerable, because the guy doesn't want to be that guy that goes, tell me what I need to hear. Tell me how to fix this, right? No, we don't want to be there. We want to be the man and in charge and whatever else. But at the end of the day, you're more of a man by stopping in a moment to be able to invest in them by listening to them more than being machismo and sarcastic and moving forward,
Yeah, I found that men stand tallest when they're either kneeling or serving or just being forgiving and
Right.
gracious. I
Exactly.
mean, because it takes discipline, it
Hmm.
takes fortitude to, when you want to be sarcastic or you want to lash out or be unkind in your tone, it takes mental strength to go, you know what? I need to hold back for a minute, listen a little longer so that I can understand. Because a lot of times, what I've found is that in my rush to fix something, I'm not
No,
fixing the right thing.
correct. You're fixing what you think is wrong, but it may not be the problem at all. There may be
Yeah.
underlying problems and issues, just like with your kids or your wife. There are other things that are leading to that thing that you see that you want to fix just the surface level, but you got to dig in on the deep. You got to go down to where we are to be able to say what's causing that and that and that and that to happen. Something down low here that we've got to really kind of work on and dig into. When my wife was I think I shared with you a little bit earlier, we went through a lot of health challenges with my wife, and we didn't know if she was going to be around. This was about maybe 10 years ago or so. And so when we were going through things, it really made you appreciate those moments where I was like flying right by and I would just let's go do it because I said so. Let's do whatever we got to do. That was a life-changing moment for us, for me to know that I have to invest in others, to know. And sometimes it does take that. Sometimes it's too late, right? Sometimes we
Yeah.
lose those things. And I hear that from so many of my listeners and viewers where they go, I don't have that anymore. And I regret the fact that I didn't do that when they were around or when they were here. And I'm like, so the time is now. The time is
Yeah.
right now to make the change and do the things you have to do to invest in the other one that you're with, or even invest in your kids, invest in your family. If you're not with a spouse or anything like that, invest in others, because one day you will regret it if you don't. So we got to make sure we're doing it right now.
Yeah, that's a really key thing. I remember years ago, before we adopted our two new kids, um, and they've been with us over 10 years now. So it's like, I mean, we're a completely blended family. I mean, it's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's so awesome.
But
So awesome.
I remember right before we started the process, I was talking about taking my family to Hawaii, and I was talking to my mom. And my mom, I'm like, man, mom, I'm not sure if we should spend the money. We got the adoption coming up. Should I save it? And she's like, you know what, Jody? She goes, you will always be able to make money, but you will not always be able to make memories.
Correct.
And she goes, invest in the memories because that will last a lifetime. And it's funny, the kids still talk about that vacation,
That's
right? I
awesome.
don't think about the money that it was,
Right.
but the memories from that vacation were phenomenal. And that's what we just
Yeah.
did last week. We're like, should we go? Yeah, we got to go. So, and
Right.
it was great.
Yeah, I did. We did it last year, Jody. We went to. I was doing an event out in Arizona, and so I said, "Let's take my son and my wife out there. We're gonna make a little vacation out of it." And then I said, "You know what? We're gonna take 2 full weeks. I got vacation on the books. We didn't have the cash to do it. I said, let's just go do." And so we took it from Arizona. We went up to the Grand Canyon, went to Hoover Dam, went to Vegas, and out to San Diego. And we made a road trip out of it. I rented a diesel Volkswagen car. We went just riding, staying in hotels along the way. And it was my son still to this day. I know it was only a year ago, but my son still goes, that was one of the best times I've ever had in my whole entire life. I mean, we saw everything, right? And we did it together as a family. And it was just so incredible. Those memories will be ingrained in us forever and ever and ever. And they're so important. You know, I loved everything about it.
Yeah, no, it's really important. So before we wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
I want to comment on something. So I did an experiment. So I live 20 minutes from the Boise airport. So
Yeah.
this morning, the nice thing about TikTok is you can go to somebody's channel, listen to it flip up, listen to it flip up, listen to it flip up, right? So I don't have to watch. I can be attentive. And so for 15 seconds at a time, for 20 minutes, I listen to every one of your TikToks. And it's amazing what inspirational library you've created over a period of 15-second increments. And it really made me think about what the power of little bitty moments,
Mm.
little bitty inspiration, and taking the time to share those.
Mm.
And if we all would just take that little bit of time and express what's in our heart for our kids or our wife or those in our circle, those in our tribe, what kind of lasting impact
Yeah.
could we have on our family and on the world at large?
I love that. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Cause I'm going to probably do that myself now and go, let me go through it, just scroll right through.
It was
But
awesome.
I'll tell you, here's the funny thing. What I've learned is in social media, especially with like younger generation, even older generation, our attention spans are so much smaller now, right? They're really small. And it really, like how many people actually sit down, people still do, but how many people sit down and read a full book or go through a full, even some people can't even sit through a full movie of 2 hours because they're like, I got to go. Right. So the way I feel about it is that if we can make investments, like you just said, small incremental ones, and all it takes is if you love somebody, you care for somebody, pick up the phone and call them and tell them, hey, you know what? I just wanted to tell you I love you and I'm thinking about you. That's it, right? It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be drawn out. Just like my buddy always tells me, he goes, there's some podcasts that are an hour and a half, 2 hours long and stuff like that. And I always tell him this. I keep mine usually between 25 and 30 minutes. And here's the reason why. I know somebody's going to work. I know somebody's going to the gym to work out. They're going to do whatever. And if they're going to listen, their attention span, as long as my quality of content is pretty good during that time frame, you can invest so much of yourself during a small window that literally opens things up. And they're going, and if they're receiving of it, they're looking at you going, this is amazing. He has invested and poured himself into me. And this is incredible. I don't even know this guy. Right. And so I love the fact that we can make small incremental positive doses of just lifting people up in so many different ways. And if we could all do that, what the world would be so much of a better place for us to live in, wouldn't it? It'd be so amazing to live in because I'd be like, I know that I've got all these people in my corner lifting me up and encouraging me to be great, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. So, well, yeah, and we're pushing to get. I try to keep mine in that same
Yeah.
realm, 15 to 30 minutes, right? It's and you and I could keep going. In fact, I have some other stuff that maybe we'll save for a second
Yeah,
thing, but
absolutely.
but I invite you guys to go check him out. It's Liquid Shano on TikTok. Phenomenal stuff. He also has the podcast Coffee Talk. So, in kind of parting, do you have one or two key things, uh, key advice, little nuggets that you think are important for dads to consider?
Yeah, I'm going to focus just on that, right? Just on the fact that dads sometimes are, when we look at things like Mother's Day, where they celebrate Mother's Day and it's all just big hoopla, and then dads are like, "Hey, Dad, thanks a lot, buddy. You know, I'll cook you breakfast. Have a good day." Right? The way I look at it is this: I feel as if you can do whatever you set your mind and your heart to, right? If you're a dad that's struggling and is literally sitting back going, man, I just can't do this, man. This is so tough. It's so difficult or whatever. You can do it. All you have to do is find out the passion. You got to find out what drives you. You got to focus in on that. And this goes for anything. It's not just kids and not just dads, but if it's health wise or it's a marriage or it's your job or whatever it is, whatever you find it, you've got a reason for doing what you're doing. Find that reason, dig in on it, focus in on that piece of it, and you can accomplish whatever it is that you set your mind to. Don't let anybody tell you you can't, and keep fighting every single day the good fight of doing it, right? I try to tell everybody that. Keep grinding, one foot in front of the other. You can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. It's not just hoopla. It's the truth.
It is the truth. Little bitty increments make a huge difference. So.
Sure does.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really enjoyed the conversation. Guys, once again, please go check out at Liquid Shano on TikTok. That's Liquid Shano, Liquid, and then Shano, Shano, and then Coffee Talk First Podcast. Phenomenal. And guys, I just want to remind you, man, really, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help us become better men, because when we are better men, we can become better fathers. We can become better husbands, and we can have the impact that we want to have on our children and leave a legacy that stands the time. I mean, that's really, you talked about it earlier, taking a mix of your grandpa and your dad. I mean, how many of us talk about the impact of our grandpa on our life? I mean, that is the legacy. And so,
Agreed.
As we're going through, man, just trying to be the best versions of ourselves, trying to hold each other accountable. That's really what it is about. So thank you guys for joining me every week right here on Father's Fire, where we explore the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows, and yes, the fun of being dad. We will catch you guys same time, same bad channel, just next week right here on Father's Fire. See ya.